everybody, and welcome to this edition of Story Talkies. We're thrilled to have Aditya Basole with us. With over a decade of work experience in advertising, OTT, and marketing across the APAC region, Aditya enjoys the science behind marketing, but also the art of storytelling that it brings out. He currently leads insights and strategy at Southeast Asia's biggest e-commerce brand. You started off, I think you graduated as an engineer, but in 4 years, you were in UCLA doing a writing and storytelling workshop or a course. I'd love to know more about that journey and just, how did it go from here, from A to literally Z?
Interesting story. I wouldn't know. I think that you will be the judge for that. Started out like most young teenagers wanting to do engineering. Did my engineering, wanted to get into robotics. It was quite a passion for me. Somehow things didn't work out. Didn't see my path into robotics per se. Got into advertising through this business school called Micah. How I ended up there was a chance. Sort of someone spoke to me about the school. I got really intrigued. I had always been interested in the world of advertising. And thought, why not give it a chance? Through Micah, what I really got was a move away from the binary ways of thinking, where, as an engineer, you're taught a lot of zeros and ones. Even within our society, it's a lot of zeros and ones. This is right, that is wrong. You should do this, you should not do that. I think what Micah did was give me a fine grounding in looking at the grays between the whites and the blacks. And that really, really helped me understand how to build stories, understand how to build brands, understand how to look beyond the obvious to be able to win consumers over. Post my MBA, I joined this company called TMRC. What I was doing was qualitative research. So going out there, talking to people, what we were working with was a specific psychological technique called ZMET, that's Saltman Metaphor Illustration Technique. And trust me when I say this, I've made people cry. The technique is about laddering down from just talking about products and things and laddering it down to emotions. Why? Because it's been established through research that there are two types of thinking that consumers do when it comes to making a decision. There's type 1 and type 2. In one kind of thinking, it's about your logical, rational decisions. And the other type of thinking is really the emotional structures that have been built related to anything, not just a brand. So what I really learned was that, the rational decisions are fine. How a brand can really make a big difference is by becoming a part of their emotional memory structures. And which is where storytelling really comes in. Any good story leads to a rise in certain hormones in the body, be it oxytocin. What better way to connect with your consumer than through emotions and hence through storytelling? So a part of my job was doing the research, going out and talking to people, hearing their stories really. We were doing a research for an Atta brand, and at the rational stage of things, what you would expect is an Atta is an Atta is an Atta. Maybe it's finer, maybe it's grainier, maybe it makes softer rotis, maybe it makes harder rotis. But when you dig deeper, you realize that, especially in the Indian society, where the traditional female roles are around the kitchen. So I'm not making a commentary on the female roles, but the experience of those females really over here. The way the roti turns out defines a lot in their heads of where they are in their relationships, how they are treating their family, their children, how important nutrition is to their lives. And all of those impact how they see their future, all of those impact how they see themselves as identities right now. So having heard a lot of these consumer stories, what I realized was to be able to tell them well, you need to understand how to tell your own story well. Now, your own story can be a story about you, or your own story can be a story about someone else that you are telling. And which is what led me to the UCLA course. The challenge I put for myself was, how does this fit into brands as a world?
And you're right in saying, as you know, we human beings are finally a collection of emotions and feelings. And we're always chasing the next oxytocin or serotonin high. So in a digital world, how has brand storytelling evolved?
Whether we live in a digital world or an offline world, uh, I don't think it changes anything really. What that does, and this comes from my experience at iFlix. So before I joined Lazada, I was working with this company called iFlix, which was like the Netflix of Southeast Asia. We were trying to create the next Netflix of Southeast Asia. A lot of local content, a lot of local stories being told. Uh, Now the digital world at best has changed watching behavior from, you know, planning to go to a cinema theater to watch a story, or being okay with the story that's coming on TV, to the huge variety of vast choices you have in the kind of stories you want to see in that moment, uh, or for that matter, staying up late till night to just watch a story because that's what will engage me. So broadly, I'd say what digital storytelling has done is uh, only changed the way we consume stories. I don't think it's changed in any way the stories that we actually tell. What it's done is it's brought in a lot more global stories into our world, into our experience. Uh, Previously, we would be exposed to the limited stories that possibly for an India, a Bollywood would bring in, maybe a few Western stories. But today, I think it's a world where we are exposed to a lot more stories. Not to say that the stories are very different, but yeah, the contexts have changed.
There's a tightrope that all of us walk, which
Mhm.
is, on one hand, short-term objectives, and using promotions to achieve those objectives, or using very, very hard to come by marketing dollars to invest in brand building and building affinity, which are more long-term objectives. It's tempting to sort of, invest in short-term because you get results immediately. But as the man with all the insights, how would you advise other marketers?
It's a very recurring question for most marketers today. I think there is no right or wrong answer uh, per se, but what I like to refer back to is a lot of models, so to say. So, of course, it will differ from industry to industry. But what I like to keep going back to is this paper by Les Binet and Peter Field. Now, it's called The Long and Short of It. It's a published journal in IPA. And what they talk about is a very similar question, which is short termism, which was your sales driven by promotions, versus long termism, which is building a brand through stories. uh, for the context of our conversation right now, let's go with that as a definition. Short termism sort of drives your brand and sales in a up and down manner. So let's say this is your platform, this is the bare minimum sales you're going to get. A short-term sale will lead to a spike, and as soon as the sale is gone, you'll sort of come down back to the stable state. Uh, you'll keep doing that over and over again over time. What you'll end up with is your base level remains the same. The promotions do drive uh, increased sales, but over a long term, you have not built anything. I think growth, to me at least, looks less like this and more like this. And which is why it is very important for brands to not just think of the short term, but think of the long term also. Now, another flaw with just short termism or short term thinking is the fact that running these promotions also pulls down your bottom lines. It means you have to give greater discounts to be able to attract customers. It means you have to run more advertising to be able to drive people to your platforms to buy. When you compare that to long-termism, which is to say you're building brands, you're telling brand stories, you're really talking to your consumers through insights that you've garnered, uh, be it through research, be it through your own dipsticks, be it whatever. But when you're able to actually talk to consumers in a language that they understand and in a language that the story really comes through. Now, what that does is, instead of the zigzag that we see in a short-termism approach, it leads to a definite increase month on month, quarter on quarter, year on year, in terms of multiple metrics. A lot of metrics that we talk about as marketers, right? So top of mind awareness. If you don't have top of mind awareness, you're not going to be the brand that people come to most often. So if you're able to tell those brand stories consistently, you build top of mind awareness. Sales, I wouldn't talk about sales because top of mind leads to directly to sales. Your engagement levels on social, for example. If you are a brand that is telling good stories, people are going to come to you, interact with you, engage with you. In a way, social is a game of not just you telling your story there, but also people sharing your stories, telling other people about your stories. And that's where storytelling really comes out, in a way, building a brand, growing a brand, not just driving sales in the short run, but also, building towards the future, if I may. Now, no brand can be built purely on tactical or purely on storytelling. Different industries have sort of different benchmarks for what sort of investments should each of those interventions have. And so something like a financial industries, where trust is very important, where connecting with your consumers is very important, you might choose to invest somewhere around an 80% of your budget on something like brand storytelling, on your on communicating your brand to people, and only 20% on sales and promotions. Whereas in a category like FMCG, for example, it can come down to a 60-40 percentage. In retail, so I work in e-commerce right now. What we have to do, definitely, the business pressures demand that we drive daily active users, which is to say we need to drive them to our platform over and over and over again. So just telling us a brand story and saying thank you for watching doesn't work for business metrics. So we try to maintain the balance at 55-45. So it's not a one size really that fits all. Both actions are important for a marketer to build for the long term, as well as address the short term goals.
With Martech coming into the picture, marketing has gotten more measurable. And as you possibly know, there was a time where advertising and marketing to some extent was considered an art more than a science. I think that's long gone in the past. And therefore, has the fun gone out of it, or has it gotten more interesting? Because it's measurable. It's definitely more accountable, but is it still a lot of fun?
I think what Martech has done, and Martech is a very broad, overarching term. It sort of incorporates attribution softwares, it incorporates your CRM softwares, it incorporates programmatic, it incorporates content management systems, a lot of things. Has it taken the fun out of marketing? If you ask advertising stalwart who's worked in the industry for 30 odd years, yes, it's definitely taking the fun out of advertising. I think you would remember the Dairy Milk cricket ad, or you would remember the Rasna ads, the tunes. You would remember a Hawkins pressure cooker, or Yeah, it was Hawkins, right? Yeah. Pressure cooker ad till date. That was because those were really stories that were told from a very authentic perspective, where you didn't have to break up your spend in 200 parts to be able to reach 200 different sets of audiences. It was a single size that fits all. I'd say the fun has been taken out. Also looking at it from the perspective of a younger audience and possibly a younger marketer as well. I think what it's done is it's added a lot more uh, finer fabric to how you think. It is a much more complex world. There are uh, much higher number of things that you need to think through when you're coming up with a marketing plan. Uh, for example, a marketing plan in the 80s and 90s would possibly have included a TV, print, radio. You need to ensure your brand story is consistent across all those three. Now, in today's world, what you need to think about is, yes, I might want to go on TV, possibly drives the highest viewership. Yes, I'd go on print and radio as well, mass viewership. But okay, so if I'm going on YouTube, how do I need to really change things? So a YouTube, my first 5 seconds are the most important, right? Whereas on TV, I have those 30 seconds, I have rapt attention from the audiences. So how do I switch the story to make maximum impact in the first 5 seconds? The same if I move it to a TikTok, for example. I know TikTok's banned in India, but in Southeast Asia, it's one of the fastest rising platforms for advertising. So if I move it to a TikTok, for example, the same format of a brand ad will not work. You need to work with 300 different influencers, get them to create custom content based on the brand strategy and the brand story that you want to tell. And I mean, it does take the fun out of the big story you want to tell, but it just does add a lot more excitement to the smaller stories that you can tell. And being able to see the bigger picture through smaller stories is in a way exciting by itself. Martech enables you as well, right? So let's say you don't have the money to run your 30 seconds at a frequency of 6, for example, because you need at least a 4 to 5 frequency for people to register that they've seen your ad. uh, you can run your 60 seconds with a frequency of 1, 30 with a frequency of 2, 15 with a frequency of 3. Ensure that people have seen all forms of your story in a way. You can use your 15 seconds as teasers and do sequential storytelling. Take them to the through the mystery of the story to the end of the story. So I think Martech is as much an enabler as it is something that's cut down on stories. Yeah, this is one topic where I have a real point of view, so to say. I think it's all made up stuff. None of it is really real. Uh, for example, yes, your attention spans on. So I'm double screening while watching TV. I'm on my phone doing other things. But at the same time, if there's something on TV that really is driving my attention, if you're telling me a great story, my phone will automatically go down. It's essentially a game of who engages me better. Now, case in point, and I'll talk about it from a very marketer's point of view. Uh, Back to my iFlix experience. So, an average viewing time on a Facebook is somewhere around 2.5 minutes. On a YouTube, the average viewing time is somewhere around 5.5 minutes. When it came to iFlix, what we realized was that the average viewing time for people was somewhere around 20 to 25 minutes. Now, it's all about the context, right? Now, when a brand wants to communicate on Facebook, the max they can take up is 15 seconds out of those 2.5 minutes. On YouTube, maybe that can be 30 seconds, although the first 5 seconds matter the most. But what we realized with iFlix was that brands had a lot more leeway to sort of tell an authentic story and take as much time as they want to tell that story. Of course, as much time means 60 to 90 seconds, unless you're doing branded content on the platform. So in a way, context defines everything. What context or what medium are you telling your story on defines the length of your story. Also, in a way, how engaging is your story defines how interesting your story is. The Martech conversation that we were having really, uh, it's the Martech conversation is taking marketing towards efficiency. In a way, it is about efficiency. How much CPM am I able to drive? What sort of completed views am I able to drive? But I think one thing we are really forgetting within the context of this conversation is that effectiveness matters as much as efficiency does. Effectiveness is about how effective is your ad, how relevant is it to your consumers, how well does it address their current needs and desires, uh, how well does it break creative clutter really to be able to stand out and apart, especially when people are double screening, at times even triple screening. How well are you able to attract their attention by breaking the creative clutter?
Some really important keywords. So on one hand, you talked about relevance, authentic, engaging. And on the other hand, you talked about effective and efficient. And it's got to come together in the right mix. Given that the fact that it's not just diminishing attention spans, but like you said, it's multi-screening. So within that 1 minute or those few seconds, you're fighting against other screens as well.
Yes.
Do you think anyone's got it right? Who are your favorite brands who's doing a really bang up job about getting this mix right?
Allow me to take a slightly parallel path for a bit.
Sure.
So, okay, when we talk about telling your brand stories, what we assume it to be is, content. It is your brand ads. It is all the videos that you create. A brand story is, I think, a sum total of all the communication that you create, all the experiences that you're able to give the consumer, and the sort of support you're willing to offer even after the sale is made. And all of that together makes up a brand story. Now, in terms of brands that have done it really well, I would say something like a Nike, although it's not an Asian brand, more of a global brand. Uh, a Nike has not just spoken about its products, but also spoken relevantly to the consumer's needs. There are these conversations in popular media about diversity, inclusion, conversations about what is right, what is wrong when it comes to possibly the environment. And what Nike has done is, number one, communicated its values, its purpose really well to match up with where the current society is moving. So, number one, they've driven relevance in a way. When it comes to the experience part of things, what they've done is they've signed on the right athletes to sort of tell their story through sport, directly through sport, not just through ads. What they've also done is enablement. So when you go to a Nike store, you'll see shoes that are made out of recycled plastic. Now I know there's a lot of chatter about anything you do is too little considering the amount of resources you use up, but it's a step for sure. It does make a dent in consumer minds. So in terms of experiences, the right athletes, sort of the right product in a way, recyclable shoes, for example. And then they have also adapted really well from being an offline product to being a digitally adept product. So you have the Nike apps, which is your Nike Run, Nike Plus, which sort of create a lifestyle out of those shoes. So in a way, they've won the experience part of things also. In terms of the after sale service, the Nike Plus, Nike Run apps work there as well, when you go to a Nike store, you can go back to them within 1 year and return your shoes if there's something that's gone wrong. So in a way, getting that whole spectrum of brand experience, brand communication, and after sales experience, getting that right is the sign of a great brand. I think Nike does it really well. I think Apple does it supremely well. Who else? Right. Moving on from just talking about product brands to content brands. So something like over and over again. But on the other end, their product is essentially content, and creating that right content and cutting that content down to create the right communication is something that these brands have done supremely well. I don't know if you remember, but there was this campaign that Spotify had launched. Uh, it was about consumer data. It went something like it was supremely copy heavy ads really. It was about to the 30 users who listen to when you're depressed playlists on a loop 20 times, know that we are there for you. It's essentially that. It's about creating a connect, doing it well, using data to tell the right stories as well.
From one storyteller to another, what was the last story that really stopped you in your tracks?
Yeah, so every once in a while there are these brands, that sort of start off really well, have been at the peak, but then they sort of start diminishing, and in a way their relevance in the world sort of reduces. Uh, the one the one ad that I remember, which was a story, was from this brand called Ram Trucks in the US. Uh, it 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 sort of doesn't talk about the product at all. All it talks about is their audience, and it tells a story about their audience, and their main audience is farmers. So it goes something like, God said, I need somebody willing to get up before dawn, milk cows, work all day in the field, milk cows again, eat supper, then go to town and stay past midnight at a meeting of the school board. So God made a farmer. So that's how the ad really kicks off. Telling stories is as much about the people you tell the stories about as it is about the story you're telling.
It's been an absolute joy to speak with you. You've been generous with your information and knowledge, and much appreciated. I know our audience and our viewers would be thrilled to listen to you.